Welcome back to the Unplugged podcast. We are heading into round two. Disappointing season opener for the Saints, going down to the Pies, 15-12, 102 to 12-13, 85. We'll touch on that in a minute, but a little bit of a different shape to the panel this week. As always, we've got Aaron McGrath. H, nice to have you back, mate. But we are missing old trusty Darren Parko, unavailable for personal reasons. Hasn't been omitted, hasn't been dropped, but personal reasons. And instead, we're joined by the somewhat honourable Philip Dalidakis, the one once honourable, sometimes honourable. I'm not sure. How does this work these days, Phil?
Well, that's the only reason I ever went into Parliament and wanted to become a minister, because the title honourable, once you're a minister, stays with you unless you do something that's pretty egregious and the Parliament takes it away from you.
What does the life call you?
This is a G-rated segment, Nick.
It isn't. You can say whatever you like on this podcast. We're unfiltered, unplugged.
Couldn't possibly, other than darling, honey, all those loving and very special words to explain the depth of emotion in our relationship.
Very good. Well, big wave, and thank you to Deborah for allowing Phil to join us this week. H, what did you think of Friday night?
Great to get back. That was the first thing. It's probably a bit of a good introduction to get back to. You sort of think, well, Collingwood, the crowd, yeah, who wants to deal with them? But getting back to them, first game atmosphere, you sort of go, yep, we're back. This is feeling great. We've missed this for basically 2 years now. Hopefully everything is in the clear. We're not going to have anything really interfere with that anymore. So that'd be great to just get a proper season in. But yeah, as we talk about the results, bit disappointing. On paper, you sort of looked at it and sort of thought, yes, that's a game that we possibly should win. We looked pretty good in the matchups, but I don't know if they've got a bit of a new lease of life under their new coach. Sort of found something that Buckley might not have known about, sort of thing, and they look switch on for the moment they came out, and sort of halfway through the first quarter, you're sitting there going, this is not looking, didn't look great. We sort of were half a step behind, and every time we got the ball, they were on top of us. It just felt like they had the one extra player to every single pack all night, and even then, they pulled the ball out and it spilled to someone behind the pack straight to their player, and we're just sort of thinking, where have these extra players come from? It almost was that, hey, can someone do a head count? Because it felt like they had the extra players out there. So hopefully it's just a bit of a slip the first week, because we've had a couple of changes from a couple of players who probably didn't contribute greatly.
Name names.
Well, I think a few people questioned Kent being played. I don't think he was that great in any of the preseason games or anything. And
I was very surprised to see Kent.
It was a name that was sort of a bit like, is that what we're really looking for? Is he an automatic 22 selection? And yes, he kicked reasonably, well, it was an early goal, but then didn't hurt a lot after that. And Mitchie Owens, I think he needs a bit of VFL time. He just looked a bit stunned out there, to be honest. He sort of got near the ball, but then didn't get the ball. If basically he kind of found the right positions, but never got it.
It's amazing.
I think the VFL will be a good place for him to play a bit of footy and work his way back in again.
It's amazing you talk about kind of that feeling of being outnumbered all the time. And I feel like we've had this conversation a few times, both on the show and kind of in person, well, I guess with each of you at different times, and with Parker, obviously. But there are so many games that it feels like there are more of them than us on the field. And this was one of those games. And H, you talked about kind of that being that half a step behind. I think you're being a little bit kind. I felt like we were a couple of steps behind most of the game. I mean, the way that Collingwood moved the ball, and you're right, they did feel like they had some renewed energy under Craig McRae. And I think that's normal. You get a new coach in and there's a new lease of life and everyone's excited and happy to be back playing footy and all that sort of stuff. And we saw all the clubs with new coaches had a win in round one. But you said that on paper, this was a game that we probably should be winning or possibly should be winning. We should definitely be winning this game of football. If we're legitimate about playing finals footy and being competitive, this is a game that St Kilda Footy Club historically doesn't win. We go in $1.60 favourites. A team that doesn't make the finals. They've changed coach. We've got some young stars coming through, or so they say, and ready to break out. And all these sorts of things. We go in a round one full of excitement and energy that we're back, and it's time for St Kilda to grow up and be men. And this is 100% a game that St Kilda should be winning. And I was bitterly disappointed on Friday night, and I think everybody was. It's just, I don't know. It was one of those things where going in, I felt a feeling of dread. Phil, I messaged you earlier in the day saying, this is a game that we should be winning. We need to be winning these games, but I'm just not confident at all. But how did you feel, I guess, both leading into the game and then walking out of the ground late Friday night?
Yeah, I actually was pretty confident going into the game on the back of what I thought was pretty solid preseason form. I thought the hit out against Carlton was really good, and I was watching them pretty closely, and we had players playing in positions that they had no right to be. For example, I think I watched Brad Crouch play on the half forward flank for about a quarter and a half. So I didn't mind the loss against the Blue Baggers because, as I said, it looked like the coaches were trying very specific things. When it came to Essendon, it looked like there was a real brand of football that I could notice that was different from last year. They were moving the ball much more quickly out of defence. They were playing on and taking first option. There was none of this going backwards or sideways when you got a mark or slowing the ball up. And so from the Essendon game, I thought, okay, so this is how they're trying to position themselves. This is how they're trying to play. And out of that game, it didn't matter to me what the score was. And, I often put on social media at those games that the only thing I want is no injuries. But out of Essendon's game, of course, we got two really important ones to Jack Billings and Hunter Clark. So going into this game, I thought, well, this is an opportunity for the guys to make a statement, for the boys to come out and to demonstrate to, not to us as the fans, but to themselves and to each other, where they were going to go, what they wanted to stand for, how they wanted the industry to accept them. And they failed at the first hurdle. And I've heard a lot of people talk about the build-up, the Shane Warne, the emotion of the game. But you know what? You can make 101 different excuses, but the fact of the matter was they didn't turn up. And the silver lining for me coming out of the game, the one thing that I hung my hat on was the fact that last year, 7 goals down, they would have lost that by 10 goals. And the fact that they came back and they fought to the end, and even though we lost by 17 points, the fact was that they played to the end and they just spent all their tickets to get back. And that's what happens when you allow a team to dominate and get so far ahead. So I was pretty proud of them for that. But exactly what you said, when they were defending, it appeared to me that Collingwood brought the ball out of our defence far too quickly, far too easily. And that might be part of us adjusting still to the zone and the play on. I think, and it's funny, I heard when I watched some of the game on replay, I heard the commentators suggest that St Kilda were playing a lot of one-on-one. When I was at the game, that's not what I saw. I did not see one-on-one at all. I saw a lot of zone and Collingwood piercing the zone far too easily. And that was a huge concern for me early in the game. And the other thing, there were two other things that I kind of walked away from. How unbelievable Nick Dacos is. First game of senior football for a kid that's obviously had a lot of raps on him, and he brought it. And so I was actually, as a football lover, I was really excited to see that. And Jack Hayes. And I'm sure that we're going to spend a bit of time talking about Jack Hayes, but what a performance. But also, what an indictment on the rest of the playing group, that a guy playing his first game of AFL football was probably the best player on the field for us. And I said it was the story of the Jacks, Jack Hayes, obviously Jack Steele, and Jack Sinclair, right? The rest of the team, there were bits that you would take out for each player, things that they did well, things that they didn't do well. But those three players, I thought, stood head and shoulders over their teammates. Obviously, speaking of a fourth Jack, I don't want to spend a lot of time on Jack Higgins because he has been singled out by the football industry this week, and rightly so for some of the things. But the only other frustration that I've got as a St Kilda supporter, that Brett Radden doesn't appeal to make statements with his players. Now, that might be because of the relationship that he's got with them, and that's okay. But if you're a footballer, I just think that if you don't have a statement made about you, in the way, do you remember back in the days of Ross Lyon when Nicky Dowell and Stephen Milne were dropped?
Yep.
And it made a statement to the rest of the playing group. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how good you are. If you don't do the team basics, there's not a role or a position for you. And so I want to see us make those statements as well.
Now we'll get to some of the I guess the player stats and a bit more of those details, I guess, in a couple of minutes. But there are a couple of things that you mentioned there, Phil, that I want to come back to. And one you talk about, and both of you have mentioned the ease at which Collingwood kind of moved the ball out of defence, and I guess got their own players involved in certain plays in different parts of the field. And I think that's a complaint that's been leveled against us pretty much since the Ross Lyon era, in that teams have found it far too easy to come out of half-back and bring the ball into midfield and then give themselves opportunities to score. And we don't seem to have the same, I don't know, fluidity, and we haven't for years. It seems to be a real issue that other teams tend to be able to do it against us really well and make it look really easy, and we make it look so difficult. H, do you have any thoughts on is there something that we're doing wrong that other teams are doing that we're just not doing? Like, how is it possible that every club can do it against us and we can't do it against anyone?
Well, Phil mentioned the zone, and that was probably the thing that was annoying me the most Friday, because you could see the players, they're set up like the Collingwood would be in the back pocket, and we'd have all their players and they'd run over towards that side of the field, and then they'd stop about 5 meters away from the player that they're watching. And you're sort of sitting there thinking, get within at least 2 meters. If you're 5 meters and they kick the ball, you're never going to get there. 2 meters away, you're a chance to spoil the ball. They just seem to be wanting to guard space more than actually finding a man and actually defending, I guess. I guess there's two types of defense. There is a zone defense and a man-on-man defense, but 5 meters away from the player, that's basically giving him a free rein to get the ball. So they just need to get a bit closer, I think. And that's why Collingwood were able to move the ball so freely and so quickly, because we were always that distance behind them as they pick the ball up. But
so, H, can I ask you a question on that? So,
yep.
Under the Ross Lyon era, the players rushed the opposition player that had a mark to close them down. Early last year, of course, with every team adjusting to the new stand rule, we got caught out by teams using that to their best effect and stranding our player. But I think umpires have responded to that and called play on very quickly now, so it's not nearly as big an issue as it has been. Do you think that if players rushed the mark to create this sort of lack of time on their behalf, rather than now stand 5 meters off the mark so that they can move laterally, that would make a difference?
It's not even just standing 5 meters off the mark. It's standing 5 meters off the player who the ball's coming to next. I don't think we actually did that as much as what we did last season, to be honest. Standing 5 meters back off the mark. I don't think we saw our guys do it even that much. But it's just the next kick, we're giving him a 5 meter radius
space
to run into to take the next mark, which was, as I said, if you're within 2 meters and they kick the ball, you can react quick enough. But if you're too far behind, you're never going to catch them.
And that's the thing, when you're continually giving defenders an out, somewhere to go to escape, and whether that was Dacos or Howe or side bottom up on the wing, there was any number. every time that we were able to kind of move the ball forward and there was a turnover or they won the ball back, they always had an out. It didn't matter. We just didn't have that sort of forward pressure that, when we go into a game with Dean Kent, with Dan Butler, with Jack Higgins, and these types of smalls up forward, that they need to be putting pressure on defense to make their role worthwhile. Otherwise, they're a liability. And we've seen that a number of times when if those small forwards aren't winning their own ball or kicking goals, that they're essentially a liability when they're not putting that type of pressure on. And that was something that was leveled at Dan Butler pretty heavily in the first half of last year. He kind of turned that around, and I'm hoping that maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call early in the season for those guys. Phil, you mentioned a couple of other things that I quickly wanted to touch on, and one of them was the I guess that statement on a number of levels. I guess a bit like you, I was hoping that we were going to come out and make that statement from the first bounce and really kind of show that we were competitive, that we were legitimate, that we're credible in some of these discussions around top 8 teams and all that sort of stuff. And we didn't, once again, from the start of a game, didn't turn up. And it was almost more disappointing that we were able to then kind of put our own stamp on it in that third quarter and turn it around. We put in all that effort to turn it around and then let it go again. And at that sort of point, you think back to Ross Lyon times, and even before that with Grant Thomas, when we'd get on a roll and you build that momentum. Once you get that momentum, you cannot let it go. You've got to grind it home. And we just didn't do it. We just kind of, as soon as we took the lead, it almost felt like the wind went out of the balloon, the air went out of the balloon. And we got to a point ahead, and all of a sudden it was like Collingwood went bang, bang, bang. And all that hard work that we'd gotten to was for nothing.
So there's one major difference in those scenarios, and that's the 666, right? So under the Ross Lyon and even the GT era, that if we got onto that role and then we were able to take on the ascendancy, invariably Ross Lyon would put one or two back in the defence just to give a bit more structure, to have some control over the ball coming out of their defence and then pushing up into our forward line. And now what happens, obviously, with the 666, if you get smashed in the clearances, right, you lose that ability to have that defensive pressure because the ball's coming in too quick. And so I think that's a serious change in the football eras, and that's just obviously in the last 10 years. So for me, I think that explains a lot of it. And I think it'd be really interesting to see if Ross Lyon was given the opportunity to coach again with some of these rule changes, how he would cope defensively without being able to apply that pressure at the same time. Can I throw one more thing at you, Nick? Right. So, because for me, it was the tale of 1 quarter versus 3 quarters. And I've tried to reconcile over the week, how is it possible that we played so poorly in the first half, and then when we got 7 goals down, all of a sudden they flicked the switch? And the one thing that I kept coming back, to me, it looked like in the first half, the players were scared. They were scared to make a mistake. And so every time they took a mark, their first instinct was, how do I go safely with the next pass, by foot or by hand? Yeah. And when we got 7 goals down, they didn't have that luxury. So it was play on at all costs, take your man on, go the first instinctive first option, and go hard, fast, long as best as you can. And so if they'd come out and played like that from the first minute, I think we would have had a very different game. And I just wonder whether or not that was more instructive of the way that Brett Rutten wants to play, which was, again, for me, it was evident in the Essendon game. And they were just, because it was round 1, because of the pressure, because of the statement, all of those things, maybe the build-up was too much for them in a psychology sense, and they needed to cut themselves some slack. So maybe the best thing for them is to go across the other side of the country, bond together as a group and say, guys, this is what we want to do. We've got no expectations except doing this for each other. And I just wonder whether that tentative steps, that nervousness, that worried about making a mistake is something that they're going to be able to eliminate, and we'll see a different brand of football.
It's an interesting one. And I don't look, it's entirely possible. And you're right in terms of the way that happened. And, in the first half, they were very tentative. they were scared. It looked like they were scared of making the mistake. And I think that, you mentioned before about the Ross Lyon, you're dropping players that don't play to standard. And I think that's something that, we haven't had that same level of standard at the club since that point. And that when the team as a whole doesn't play to a standard, it's the same guys, the same couple of guys that tend to bear the brunt or pay the price for this kind of team form. And we'll touch on that a bit later on when we look at round 2. But the same guys that come in and out of the team are in and out. Dean Kent, Mitch Owens, after one game, it was a poor game. Let's not beat around the bush. But there's no surer way to ruin a kid's confidence than to throw him into the fire in round 1 and then drop him after a poor one. And you're right. You can't play cautious football when you're 30 points down. You just can't. I mean, you can't win games of football like that. But I also feel like in this day and age, and you've mentioned things like 666 and the stand rule and a whole bunch of other things, that you can't win games of football in general playing scared, playing tentative. You need to be able to move the ball to be able to win games of footy, because you need to be able to score. And that's been our issue for a number of years, is being able to put the score on the board. We cannot expect to win games of football trying to throttle teams or trying to slow things down all the time. And it felt like in that first quarter, especially, that we'd get the ball and we'd stop and prop and look around for best option. We weren't taking that instinctive move to take the mark and take the first step and move quickly and look further afield to look for someone running past or to hit someone up on a quick lead or anything like that. It was take the mark, step back, and let's hold it and let's see what happens. And I think that now, as the competition moves towards, I guess, trying to get back to that old-fashioned move the ball, move it forward, kick high scores, that you just can't stop and prop and wait anymore not for big parts of games. And it's one of those things that, we've got this segment on the show this year. That's so St Kilda. It's so St Kilda to get 7 goals down and then all of a sudden play magnificent football for a quarter and then stop. That is such something that only we can do, and we can do it so well. There's no other.
The Doggies have done that 2 weeks in a row.
Well,
right? So
but they've won a flag, so who cares?
Sure, but have a look at their midfield, right? Bontempelli, right? McRae, Libber when he was in there this week, Bailey Smith the week before, but it's now the current era where teams do get run-ons, and honestly, 666 and being crunched in the centre has so much to say for that.
I think the Dogs have another issue, and that is that they have too many of the same type of player that they're trying to square peg into positions on the field that they're not suited to. They have too many A-grade midfielders to have in the midfield. And so you play some at half back, you play some at half forward, you got some in the goal square. And when they're winning the ball, it's all fine. But as soon as the other team adjusts, which we've seen Melbourne do, which we saw Carlton do some different things from the opening bounce this week, when the other team does things to change and switch things up, and the Bulldogs can't go with them with some of those areas, and all of a sudden they're not getting their hands on the ball as much, then they really struggle to be able to wrestle back momentum until they're able to get their hands on the ball. Once they get their hands on the ball, it's almost game over. And if they can do that consistently for 4 quarters, they're not going to lose many more games. But when teams get on a bit of a roll like Melbourne have against them, like Carlton did early, the Bulldogs find it difficult to get back into the game because they don't have specialists all around the ground. They've got a bunch of elite midfielders, and we could do with a couple of those guys. If you ask me, I'd love to have a couple of those guys in our club doing what they do best, which is winning the footy and being dynamic in the middle of the ground. And I think that we lose so much to other inferior teams because we don't have that level of quality in the middle. We've got an absolute gun, and then we've got a couple of B graders, and then below that, it's like every other club's bottom 6 is kind of our mid roster and on. And it's a shame because there's so much that we can do, and we showed it in that third quarter that when we play good footy, we play great footy, and they're fun to watch. It's fun to barrack for. It must be fun to be out there playing, and we'll talk about Jack Hayes, I'm sure, in a lot more detail in a minute as we go through some of the players. But imagine being Jack Hayes on debut and clunking some of those marks up on the wing and kicking those goals and getting the lads around you and all that sort of stuff. When you get the momentum and things are firing and everything that you're planning on doing or that you've planned on doing is actually working out. Like, we play great footy when it works. It's just when it doesn't work, we look awful. But having said that, it wasn't all bad. You mentioned that the three Jacks: Jack Steele, Jack Sinclair, Jack Hayes. I mean, I think it's going to be hard pressed for any of us to get anyone else in the votes this week. There might be a couple. I mean, Brad Hill had 26 touches at 77% disposal efficiency, intercepted really well, score involvements. Jade Gresham back at the elite level, 24 touches, 6 clearances, 500 meters gained and 2 goals. Rowan Marshall, I thought, was outgunned by Brodie Grundy, I thought, but competed well, 21 touches, 25 hitouts, 7 score involvements and a couple of clearances as well. Membry kicked 3, obviously. But it is the 3 Jacks: Jack Steele, 28 touches, 6 clearances, 7 tackles. Jack Sinclair, 25 touches, 600 meters gained, 6 score involvements and 6 inside 50s. And Jack Hayes on debut. One of the top 5 best debuts since 2010, according to the AFL player ratings. 18 touches, 10 marks, most of them contested, and 3 goals. In order of my votes, I'm going Jack Hayes, Jack Sinclair, Jack Steele for the 1 vote. H, how about you? How your votes stack up?
I gave Jack Sinclair 1.
I keep forgetting that we're doing 1, 2, 3 now instead of 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Well, it's the first one this year, so we'll excuse it. Gave 2 the Jack Steele. It was probably the 9 clangers that took it away from him, because for him that's a very high number. I think we can excuse that to be perhaps the running of other players not getting to positions that they were last year that he was able to hit up, and just I almost fell over when I saw at halftime he was leading to possessions. It just didn't feel like he had been. Well, then he was on, I think it was 18 or 19 at halftime. I went, geez, I reckon I've only seen him 7, 8 times.
He certainly
just
wasn't
didn't
as
feel
dynamic
like
as some of the other guys on the field, and especially on the Collingwood side as well. They just seem to be more dynamic.
Yeah, just the impact of the possessions that he normally has just wasn't there. I feel like he had less possessions in the second half, but they actually felt like a lot more than what the first half did. So his second half was better despite having less of the ball, which is, it's just a strange way for a game to pan out when you look at it. And yeah, Jack Hayes 3. I mean, we'll see if he can go again this week. If hopefully it's not a case of a one-hit wonder, and yeah, he's not the quickest guy going around, but he was reasonably hard to catch. So I mean, I think the one thing that he said himself and others had said, his pace would be the one question. But yeah, he dug in, and he dug in deep. The one mark that he took towards the end of the third quarter,
up on the wing,
backing back into the pack to I think there was 2 other players that were looking at the mark, and he came back, ran back and ran over the top of him. It was only 10 seconds before he got up off the ground, fighting for breath. Basically, he was down on the ground trying to find breath, and then he's looked up. He's about to run off the ground, and he looked up and went, "The ball's coming. That ball's mine." And you could just see he ran back, and you're going, he's going to mark this. You could see it the whole way, and you sort of look and go, why can the first gamer show us how it's done? I mean, I don't think I saw any other player do that sort of thing Friday night. He dug deeper than anyone out there by so far. It was unbelievable. But yeah, just that moment, I was like, this kid's got something in him. He's been a big find.
Now, Philip, this is your time to shine. It's your first time on the show. You have an honourable title, and you're replacing, in St Kilda terms, the Honourable Darren Parkin. Who is your 1, 2, and 3 from Friday night?
1 vote, Jay Steele. 2 votes, Jay Sinclair. 3 votes, Jay Hayes.
Very good. Nicely done.
You don't
I like it.
I was going to say, you don't even have to do J. You can actually say Jack.
It was a tale of the Jacks, as we've said. But I think from a Collingwood perspective, I mean, you mentioned Nick Dacos earlier, Phil, and this kid is going to be a star. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But when his first touch was an absolute shocker. Kicked it straight, lace out to our defender. And at that point I thought, is the hype real? And then within a couple of minutes, it was like, yes, the hype is very real. This kid can seriously play football. But I didn't even have him in my couple of best for Collingwood. I mean, it was their impact players that really, provided the impact for them. They were dynamic. They were quick. They were intercepting. It was guys like Jeremy Howe, like Jordan De Goey, Pat Lipinski in his first game for Collingwood. Steele Sidebottom did exactly what he's been doing for 15 years and never seems to get picked up, never seems to get tagged, and just destroyed us on the wing. Brodie Myercheck is one of those guys that always seems to have a field day against us. He kicked a couple of goals as he always does. And the Pies beat us in most of the key metrics, disposals, clearances, and tackles, which is concerning and really goes to that, I guess the lack of pressure and that allowance of quick ball movement and out off halfback that they continually had. That it was guys like Jeremy Howe, Brodie Grundy had 25 touches. De Goey had a lot of the ball and was impactful up half forward, and those guys that continually, time after time, seem to win the ball without pressure and without a tackle, without a man on them.
So at the risk of never being invited back if you have a vacancy, Nick, I'd challenge what you said about Mitch Owens' game. By no stretch am I going to suggest it was a great game. I thought for a first kid coming off, obviously playing at the under-18s level last year, I thought it was a good introduction to football. I think the blame actually lies with the coaching staff. So that last quarter, who puts him in the middle with 10 minutes to go when we're needing a clearance to go forward and kick a goal? Yep. Right? Seriously, the coaching staff might, if they were on this program, they would say, you know what, they were prepared to sacrifice the win because at that moment the teachings for him were more important. I'll go bullshit, right?
Yep.
Because 4 points in a long season is more important than telling Mitch in his first game, that's how you play football. He's going to learn that. And I thought he did some nice things. I thought that it showed that he does have some development to go, but he didn't look out of place. And so from my perspective, I thought it was a good intro to football. And I think the coaching staff certainly had a lot to blame. And in that third quarter and the fourth quarter, as good as Jack Sinclair was off the halfback, and he was brilliant for us, he is a point of difference in the middle. So you talk about the sameness of the Dogs with some of their players, but when you've got Seb Ross, Brad Crouch and Jack Steele in the centre with Marshall, they're all one-pace players. They all do the same thing. They all do it very well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not having a crack at any of them, and they do it far better than I could even dream about. But the fact of the matter is that's why Gresham's so important, because he's different in the middle. That's why Zach Jones is so important, because he's different in the middle. And so I would have had Jack Sinclair in there for the whole last quarter and said, mate, you are not getting a breather, so just run yourself silly.
Phil, I don't think you're disagreeing with me at all, to be honest, because I don't think that, look, I don't think Mitch Owens had a good game, but I 100% don't think that it's right to make him the scapegoat and to drop him for our result. I would be much more happy with us playing Mitch Owens again and saying, we know that this wasn't your ideal game. We know this wasn't the best game you've ever played of footy, but we've got confidence in you. And, let's say you have 10 touches this week and maybe it's not another great game. Then you go back to the VFL and you get some confidence back, but we've got you. We understand that this is going to be a learning curve for you. We're not expecting you to come in and have 30 and kick 2 every week. You're not Dustin Martin, you're not Nat Fyfe, you're Mitch Owens. And this is going to take a little bit of time. And I don't think he had a great game. I'm not going to say he had a good game. I don't think he had a great game. I don't think he was our worst player. and I don't think he deserved to be made the scapegoat. That's all I'm saying.
Who were your worst three on the ground, excluding Mitch Owens?
Tough one. I had Seb Ross in there. I had Dean Kent in there, and I had, probably unfairly, Dougal Howard, only because of some of his disposal. I think Dougal Howard is incredibly important to our structure, and he's essentially a lock to play every week regardless. But I think he had an average game at best. I think he struggled in some contests with guys that were smaller and not as strong as he is. And then I think his disposal let him down a fair bit of the time. How about you? Who did you have in our three worst?
I was going to say toughly, there's probably a couple of players I've put in there in the way of contribution and execution. I think after he's kicked his first goal, I think Kent's dropped away quite a fair way. So I think it was quite frustrating to watch. He was one of those players. It would be there and thereabouts, and would drop off behind when Collingwood got the ball. And if we picked off every time they tried to run off the ground, he was be sitting by himself every single time. But it didn't happen often enough for him to be sitting behind the ball that often. So yeah, I found he was there. And then I don't know if he's fully fit at the moment. He seemed to be a little bit off the pace, but Ryan Burns seemed to struggle a little bit. He just didn't seem quite there. We know he's got the ability. We know he's got the football brain, but he just didn't seem to be right there when it mattered on the night. And I can only throw Jack Higgins in for the 4 points. I don't know how you pull the ball that far around the corner from the top of the goal that it just scrapes in for a point on the other side. He knows where he's on the ground. He knows where the goal is. That has to be finished. That goal has to be kicked.
Let me ask both of you about Jack Higgins. And I don't want to spend too much time on Jack Higgins because, as you've mentioned, I think he gets unfairly targeted a lot. And he was at times last year. He's been spoken about a lot this year. Now, there's one moment, I think, specifically that's been doing the rounds on St Kilda Twitter and the Facebook groups and all that sort of stuff. And that is running into what was essentially an open goal. There were a couple of players ahead of him, but they were 20 meters ahead of him. Had Jade Gresham to his left running further, and he had a Collingwood defender running at him on his right. And now all the talk has been that he should have handballed off to Gresham, the left of himself, and then put the block on to Shepherd, allow Gresham to stroll in and kick the goal. My opinion is, yes, that's probably a decent option, but Jack Higgins is a goal kicker. He had fresh air in front of him. There was plenty of space between him and the Collingwood defender for him to take more time to steady up, to straighten up and just slot it, just kick through the ball straight, instead of doing what he did, which essentially was something between kicking it to the top of the square, kicking it to the pocket and having a shot. I'm not really sure what he was trying to do, but whatever it was, it failed. Phil, what did you make of that moment? And what would, if he could have that time again, what would you be telling him to do?
So let's work through it. He's down on confidence, and I think he was going for goal. Right? We're only going to know this if we actually ask him the question and he gives us an honest answer. I think he was going for goal and he miskicked it, because goodness knows, if he was genuinely kicking it to one of our players on a 1-on-2, he shouldn't be playing again this season. Because if anyone thinks that you're kicking to a 1-on-2 scenario when you're 40 out from goal, running by yourself with a teammate on your left, right? Seriously, you've got no future. So I think he's miskicked it. He's gone for goal. It's slewed off his boot to the right and created that 1-on-2 scenario. Obviously, Gresham on the inside, that's not a great option for him, because Gresham is going to have to do what Milne always did, which was run back into the centre and then kick across his body to score the goal. But that still makes it more challenging in terms of scoring the goal. So, Nick, you are spot on. What he needed to do was run an extra 20 metres. And in fact, what Gresham should have been doing, because this has not been covered in any of the football commentary I've heard this week, Gresham should have been the one saying, mate, you are free. Keep running, keep running. Instead, I think Gresham was there calling for the ball. And people have focused on the fact that he didn't pass it to Gresham. Jack Higgins is there to kick goals.
Correct.
And when he's got his player there, Gresham's actually job was to say, mate, I've got you. I will shepherd you if somebody comes near. You keep running. And then that way, as he gets to 20 out from the goal, one of the Collingwood players peels off. Gresham's there to either take the hand pass over and then hand pass over the other Collingwood defender that would have rushed him. And I can't remember which St Kilda player it was by himself. But I actually think that Gresham is just as responsible for this as what Higgins was. That's if I'm right about Higgins miskicking it and going for goal. But either way, he needed to run in an extra 20 and then slot it. And I don't, sorry, I was going to say I don't mind Higgins kicking 4 points, right? Obviously I do mind, but what I mind is the process for a professional footballer. He's going to kick points. We all know that. No one is going to kick 100% accuracy. Even the great Plugger never did that. So what they need to do, they need to be better at clearing their minds if they do that and not worry about it, not dwell on it and get on with it. That's one of the things that I love about cricket, funnily enough. In cricket, unlike baseball, once you're out, you're out. Don't dwell on it. Just you've got one chance. So in football, you've got lots of chances to redeem yourself. So don't get caught up in what you did wrong or didn't do well. And that's what I loved about Nick Dacos, right? First touch contributed to a St Kilda goal, but it didn't worry him for a moment. And he had the strength of mind in his very first game to go back and treat each other possession as a new possession. And I'd love to see, I mean, you saw that with Max King when he started kicking points. You could see his head drop and go, oh shit, I've got the ball again. I don't really want it. In actual fact, mate, you were amazing in the second half of last season. The players should be going up to him, mate, you've got this. And you know what? Even if you don't have it this shot, you're going to get it next shot. Don't worry about it. And you might remember he got one over the back in the third quarter and was able to just kick a little dinky across his body 7 meters out from goal after he'd missed one. And the commentators went, he'll be great. Awesome. Don't get caught up on that. Be focused on the process, and then the result will take care of itself. And I'd like to see more commentary from the club about that. And I'd also like to see more critical analysis about what Gresham was saying and doing. Instead of calling for the ball, it was his job to say, you are clear, I will shepherd you, you keep running and you dob this.
Yeah, I agree. H, what was your take on that particular play?
It's pretty much, I think it's pretty well summed up there. That I had the same sort of thought when I saw the picture at first as well. I think there was only the two options. There is either he goes on and kicks the goal and Gresham backs him up, or he gives the ball over and shepherds the Collingwood player coming in. And if he shepherds that player, Gresham has the space to run in back into field and slot it around the body, which I've got more confidence in him doing that than running straight in. So they're the two options you take. But I don't know, because Gresham has missed a fair bit of footy over the last 2 years when whether they haven't played a lot of footy together, I guess. Maybe they don't understand each other yet. Maybe it's that small brigade of footballers we've got in the forward line just don't seem to blend well yet. They're the sort of four players that you look at and you go, these four guys could destroy teams, but other times they just get in each other's way. So it's going to be a matter of them actually playing together, actually working together, going, all right, well, this is what we need to do for each other when we're in that sort of situation. But it just doesn't seem to be that communication between them, though. Whether they even said a word to each other after that situation, who knows? Either of them they might not even talked about it. So, But that's the sort of thing where they've got to get together, or the coaches got to get them together and say, hey, work this out. You're professional footballers. You've got to figure out what is the best way to get the result we want from that play. It's just a matter of how can we get that goal?
It's an interesting one. We spoke a lot last year about needing Jade Gresham back and him being the X factor that we've missed for essentially 2 years. And I think that he's kind of proved that already. And I'm not sure we really need to talk more about Jade Gresham, because we know how important he is to what we want to do. I guess it's on those two other guys, Higgins and Butler, who they're both brought in to be small forwards, right? Their job is essentially to create havoc inside forward 50, but both of them have been quite open about wanting to spend more time in the middle. And it's games like last week where you're missing your Zach Jones, where Jade Gresham's only coming back to full fitness. And Phil, you mentioned it, that starting center line of Steele, Ross, and Crouch they're good at winning the ball, but there's not an X factor. They're not dynamic. If Steele's 5% off his game, which he probably was, it wasn't his greatest game. He was still very good, as we know he always is. But he doesn't have the point of difference that a Gresham has or a Zach Jones has. And when you're missing Zach Jones and Gresham's still not 100% and back to full fitness and able to run out full games in the middle, then you need guys like a Butler or Higgins to go through the middle and provide that dynamicism and impact type play, whether it's at a clearance or coming out from a stoppage or whatever, providing that outlet at half forward to be able to move the ball into the forward 50 that they just don't seem to be able to do. And I'm not sure we've given them opportunities. They've had time in the middle, they've had time up forward, and it just seems like ever since 2020, all of last year, there were issues with both Butler and Higgins at different times for different reasons in different ways. But I'm not sure what the answer is to get the two of them, let alone the three of them, adding Gresham into that conversation. How to get those two guys, Butler and Higgins, clicking in our forward line, but also get them impacting, the contest or the play further up the field.
They're very different players. They're little blokes, but Higgins and Butler are very different players. Butler naturally plays a high half forward, does a lot more defensive work than what Jack Higgins does. Jack Higgins is a far better crummer naturally and is much better closer to goal. That's not to say that Butler obviously doesn't crumb well. We've seen him do some amazing crumbing, certainly off the rucks where he's running at full tilt, takes the ball and kicks the goal, but they do play it very differently. So, it's an interesting dilemma. And I think when we get to time to talk about the team this week, I've got some not controversial picks that I think that they should have gone with for the team. But the one person I think we're really missing, and it's really funny to say this because he's only been at the team for really a couple of seasons, and that's Leo Connolly. And he's had an interrupted pre-season. But I think that if he was fully fit through the preseason, I think he starts and he's a point of difference. And one of the things that I loved about him, and I do like this about a lot of the young kids that come through, they're unencumbered from the past. They take the first option. They are exciting to watch because they take the game on. And as a supporter, right, it's a fine balance for a player taking the game on and doing something reckless in terms of a defensive structure. But I would rather see a player take the game on and make a mistake than kick sideways or backwards and allow the opposition to move 15 players behind the ball and clog it up and make it very difficult to move the ball forward. Yeah, and if you were Max King, surely you'd be pulling your hair out by now, because how many times do they have to kick the ball to him on top of his head? I know he's got an amazing reach, but seriously, how about we just put it out in front and allow his long arms to extend and grab the ball in front of him instead of on top, which allows everyone to smash in from behind and allow a second or a third player to come in over the top.
I mean,
at the same time, I think they've also been coached to deliver it to him that way, because as we know, he does take the ball at a very high point. So I think they're trying to accommodate that as well at the same time. He doesn't take a lot of marks out front on his chest. I've rarely seen him do it. So it seems to be that he calls for the ball, and that's where he places himself to take that mark. But I think that's where it also then hinders us in the way that I found Membry a couple of times. They put it over his head, and he's been the one that we know jumps off 2 feet. Their defenders sort of climbed over the top of him a fair bit. So I don't know if it's something that's been the training for when they're kicking it to Max or what, but yeah.
Two words for you, H. Jeremy Howes, right? That guy's got more springs in his leg than a slinky. And right, the one team you can't do that to is Collingwood, when you've got a fit Jeremy Howes in the back line that will peel off his player and come over the top as a second and spoil that ball.
I'll tell you what, yeah. Nick Riewoldt kicked 700 goals at centre half forward. If we had a midfield that knew how to kick it out in front of him instead of either at his boots or over his head, he would have kicked 1,500. So, you know, what Nick Riewoldt was able to do, I think, speaks volumes. But we've probably spoken enough about the Collingwood game. We could probably go for another hour on it, to be honest. But Phil, we've got you on the show this week. We may as well, I guess, get some answers out of you and get you to tell some stories. Now, for those of you who don't know Philip Dalidakis, we're not going to talk too much about the politics and all of that sort of stuff. But Phil has been a member of Parliament for a number of years. He was the Minister of Trade and Investment, the Minister for Innovation and the Digital Economy, and the Minister for Small Business for a number of years between 2015 and 2018. Under the Andrews government, has been out of Parliament since 2019. He's obviously a very successful businessman in his own right as well. But Phil, obviously it's not I guess your typical white Anglo-Saxon surname, Dalidakis, Greek, European family, heritage, but you were born here, massive St Kilda fan. Tell us about your St Kilda history.
Yeah, so I have to go back, obviously, to my mum. I think I sent her a text message the other day saying that I cursed her for the life of unfulfilled dreams and ambitions as a St Kilda supporter. And obviously my children do that to me now because I have literally forced them. And I'll tell you this very funny story.
And then you became a public servant and provided everybody else with unfulfilled dreams.
Well, we'll leave. We said no politics, Nick. So fortunately for me, I can get away from that. But so Mum was actually a refugee to Australia back in 1946. She had been born in Shanghai. My mother's parents were German Jews that fled Nazi Germany. In fact, my grandfather was taken from my grandmother 7 days after their wedding in 1935 and put into one of the very first concentration camp that was built was called Dachau. My grandmother managed to get him out before the war broke, and they found their way to Shanghai, which was the only port open to Jews fleeing Nazi Europe or Nazi Germany at the time, which obviously sadly became a large part of Nazi Europe. And there my mother and my aunt were born. And one of my grandmother's cousins had found his way to Gippsland through the ship called Dunera. Without going into a history lesson, that was a ship of Jewish refugees from Europe that tried to land in the UK at London. And of course, the Poms did what they do best when they didn't want people. They sent them on a boat to Australia, which is how the Dunera ended up in Australia. Anyway, my Berthold Meyer, my grandmother's first cousin, sponsored them out here from Germany, and they lived in Ackland Street North. And so as a young girl, my mum would literally walk across Fitzroy Street to the Junction Oval and watch St Kilda play. And so a lifelong love of St Kilda started there. And then she met my father going on a trip to Europe. And before the Love Boat was actually a TV show, my father was on the ship working. And by the time the ship docked in Piraeus, they were an item. And she convinced him that his future was both here in Australia and also with her. So that's the family story in a couple of minutes, and how we became lifelong St Kilda supporters. And then, of course, she made my father become a St Kilda supporter if he was going to stay here. And it was a rite of passage for us as kids and a rite of passage for my kids as well.
Very good. There's obviously, I think there's probably a lot of similarities between parts of your family, parts of my family, and a lot of the I guess, the St Kilda community in St Kilda, in Caulfield, Elsternwick, and parts of Victorian, and indeed parts of Australia and around the world, from that kind of the Jewish heritage, fleeing Europe and all that sort of stuff. Growing up as a kid, were you a St Kilda fanatic, or did that kind of happen later in life?
No, I was always a fanatic. In fact, for those of you that remember Moorabbin well, we used to stand under the Snow Deli sign in the forward left pocket on the South Road end, and we would stand there. And my earliest memory was leaving the game and bursting into tears, turning to my mum, who was a primary school teacher her whole career, and saying, "Mum, why do we always have to leave?" And my mum, being a teacher, turned to me and said, "So that the other team can feel good about themselves." And I said, "Well, when's it our turn?" And I'm still asking that question today. But I'm going to tell you this funny story, right? So it's about going through the generations. I reckon that this story is one that every St Kilda parent with kids has probably come across. But I've got 3 children. My middle one, Asher, Zoe's my oldest, Asher, and then Benjamin. Anyway, Asher had a lot of girlfriends in primary school that were all Hawthorn supporters, which is not a surprise because it was during the time, obviously, that Hawthorn won back to back to back. Anyway, she came home one day and she said, "Dad, I've decided that I'm going to support Hawthorn." I said, "Just wait there, Asher, just 1 minute." I went and got our largest suitcase from our bedroom and started putting her clothes in it. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, you can't live here if you're not a St Kilda supporter." And she burst into tears, uncontrollably crying. And she then says, "Dad, I promise I'll be a St Kilda supporter." I said, "Okay, great. You promise?" And she goes, "Yes." So I'm not going through this again. She goes, "No, I promise." So I put the clothes back, the suitcase back. Anyway, I felt so bad for 3 years. For 3 years, I carried this guilt. And 3 years later, I pulled her aside and I said, "Asher, I want you to know I'm really sorry." She goes, "What about, Dad?" I said, "Well, 3 years ago, this is what happened." She goes, "I don't even remember that." So for 3 years, I was carrying this guilt for no reason whatsoever, because my daughter had not remembered for a moment that I'd threatened to actually send her away if she actually ditched the Saints as her team.
There is no such thing as anything more powerful than a Jewish St Kilda supporting parent's guilt. H, you've got kids of your own. Have you had any parenting moments where you've had to tell them, "Don't follow me, don't follow my footsteps, and choose another team"?
No, my 2 are members. They're members already. Their grandfather has tried to get them over to Collingwood every now and then, just giving them a little bit of the "come on, make them say go Pies," that sort of thing. But I've quickly turned around and said to them, if you ever want to come to the game with me, you're going to have to barrack for St Kilda. So we haven't got to the point that they're old enough yet to say, "Oh, you're moving out." But yeah, that's the whole, if you want to come along, you're going to have to. So yeah, we'll see how long. They're just getting into the school age now, so we'll see how it goes with the influence from other kids. Hopefully they're the ones doing the influencing.
Well, H, the only lesson you need to take from my story, mate, is don't carry the guilt with you, but keep making the threats.
Keep the suitcase under the bed ready to go. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah,
send them to seafood.
It wouldn't be an idle threat.
Now, Phil, stories of the family and all that stuff is great, and we love hearing those stories. But what people really want to hear about is your time as a Victorian, a Melbourne power broker, and some of the discussions that you've been in around the club, with the club, around projects, whether it's Seaford, Moorabbin, any of the other things. I know that you know a lot of people within the club, and have done so for a number of years. But what are some of the things that you're able to share with us about some of your time working with and around the club? Is there anything that might not be so well known? There's been plenty of projects and opportunities for St Kilda around the Traps over the years, but is there something that might be maybe not so well known that you can share with us around some of those decisions that were made?
I guess I've been privy to a lot of things, so I've got to be always careful not to betray confidences. Certainly, I was very publicly involved with pushing the AFL for a Victorian-based team to play in Shanghai. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, of course, that, as far as I'm concerned, AFL started here in Victoria. And so when I was the Victorian Trade Minister, to have a football game in a massive overseas market for us without a Victorian team playing there felt to me that we were missing a great opportunity. So Victoria, even though it was the Power versus the Suns at the time, Victoria was a sponsor of the game, and we used it for massive trade opportunities, and it worked for us. So that led to obviously discussions with the AFL for a Victorian-based team, and I was always very careful with the AFL to not push a specific team. And as a result, obviously, we came to an agreement with them that the Power would play a Victorian-based team. And obviously, it was then for the AFL to determine which club that was. And ultimately, that turned out to be St Kilda. So obviously, I was pretty happy with that outcome. Unfortunately, I didn't get to the St Kilda game when we played there. But I'll tell you one story, and I don't want to embarrass Richard Goyder for this, but the first time that we went over for the Power Suns game, Richard and I were sitting next to each other in the stands, and the camera kept panning to Richard, not me. I just want to make that clear. And at the same time, Fremantle were playing in Perth at the same time back home. And Richard's a massive Freo supporter. And so while we were there, I said to him, mate, I'm sure the camera is on you, so I'll give you score updates. So I was literally, and it was a close game. I can't remember who they were playing, but it was a close game. And I remember constantly giving him updates that I was getting on my phone about the scores. In between that, I kept getting nasty text messages from my wife back home. And Deborah kept sending me these text messages. Get off your phone. Get off your phone. All you are, she kept saying, all you're doing is you're on your phone. And I couldn't write back and say, I'm on my phone because I'm helping the AFL chairman so he knows what's happening with his team. But that's actually why I was on my phone, trying to do the right thing by somebody else, getting slammed by my wife for doing it. So there you go. So there's just a bit of fun, but it was I was really supportive of the game in China, not because we were going to convert 1.4 billion Chinese into playing our game, but because I genuinely believe that there's a place for what I call soft diplomacy in sport in terms of our cultural relationships with other countries. And as a result, I think we can leverage that. Relations with China now, we're not getting political, but are pretty tense. And I think that using our relationships with people and culture and sport is a really important way just to dial it back a bit and to try and remind people of the people-to-people relationships. And I'll tell you, although the club will never, ever come out of my lips, but I did have discussions with the club about whether or not the Victorian government would support them having a game in Singapore. And obviously, it's well known that at one point in time, Richmond were looking at whether they could play a game in India as well. So there were opportunities for us to support the game and trade and development in our region. And I was only too happy to do that regardless of what club it was.
Now, obviously, one of the big talking points at the moment actually is about club funding and that sort of thing. Occasionally, we'd see money coming from the government into the game and funding, I guess, either it'd be like down at St Kilda at the moment, down at Moorabbin, the new the buildings there and everything like that. Sort of, is there a big process to get any of that through? Do you know that basically do they sort of put money aside for that kind of thing and go, yeah, look, we know this is going to come up at some point, this is sort of the area we're looking at keeping it for? Or does a team really have to jump through hoops to try and get something to put something forward?
Yeah, so it's a bit of both, H. The club itself will have a number of strategic objectives that they're trying to pursue. One will be, obviously, for example, in St Kilda's instance, the Danny Frawley Centre, the rebuild of the main administration wing, providing the women their own change rooms, and making sure that the women's program is funded in accordance with them being a genuine individual team as part of our club, as distinct from a group of women playing football at the club. And that's an important distinction. And so the club will have all of those long-term objectives, and then they'll have to prioritise them themselves, and then they'll go to government and say, these are the areas, or these are the projects that we're looking for support from. Fortunately, that Moorabbin Football Club is right on the boundary often, or just inside the electorate of Bentley, which has always been, or for the last 20 years, a marginal seat in political terms. So then from a political perspective, you look at programs that you can support that have the basis in strong community foundations, but at the same time have a return on investment for the community as well. So for example, we look at the Danny Frawley Centre that got funding from the Morrison government as well as the Andrews government. And that was a co-contribution towards a centre that is going to be open for the community. So you can see that there's that community impact, that opportunity. And can I just take this opportunity to really pay tribute to the leadership that Matt Finnis has played. Also, somebody that gets really ignored in all of this, and he'd be pretty embarrassed by me mentioning his name, but a guy called Peter Summers. I think that the position that St Kilda's in right now, financially, we paid $4 million of debt down last year. We're getting our debt back under control. I think is in large part absolutely due to both Peter Summers and Matt Finnis. I'm devastated that Matt's leaving, but after 8.5 years, he's decided he needs something new to freshen him up. And I dare say that the last 2 years of COVID have been a really taxing time for sporting administrators and CEOs right across the industry, because they had to deal with the soft cap, sacking people that would otherwise have had jobs. And it would have been emotionally and intellectually and personally and professionally pretty challenging and emotionally challenging. So Matt's done an amazing job to get us to where we are. We've now got, I think, a centre that is, if not leading here in Australia, by the time they finish their plans, it will be. And I think the women's program, and Nick and I each have had a lot of discussions privately about the women's program, because I'm a massive supporter of AFLW. With 2 daughters, I actually see firsthand the impact it has, the old adage, you can't be what you can't see, and have been really excited by how the club has really embraced that opportunity, not because professionally or financially it's the right thing to do, but because it is the right thing to do, to have a women's team that's competitive, to have a pathway for young girls that are supporters, that can play and be like their heroes, just the way the young boy used to be able to do, I think is great. And anyway, that's enough. But yeah, Matt and Peter, I think, did a tremendous job. And I think Lethers will do a great job going forward. And I think that Andrew Bassett also is demonstrating some really strong leadership. And I know Andrew privately and personally, and I think that he will leave no stone unturned to get the club both in a financial position to be successful off the field, but without a doubt, with both eyes focused on being successful on the field.
Now, at this point, I want to warn the listeners that normally each week on this show, it is Darren, it is Parko that kind of keeps things ticking along, and we move things really quickly, but he's not here. So that's kind of on me now, and I just don't do that. And we've got someone who gives us a little bit of a different perspective. So I've got a few more questions, and we will talk about AFLW in a minute, if that's all right, Phil. But I wanted to ask you about Moorabbin and Seaford. And I don't know, you and I have known each other for a while, and we've had a lot of discussions about a lot of different things, but we haven't really spoken about Seaford and Moorabbin and your role in any of that, if any. And I know there's a lot of discussion amongst St Kilda fans about how the move to Seaford happened. Was it the Kingston Council? Was it BitGov? Was it the club? How that all happened, and then how it happened that we moved back. And obviously, you've mentioned Matt Finnis, and I think we can all agree that Matt's done an incredible job. A, given the circumstances, but B, in general. And another thing that I want to ask you is around the cultural and lifestyle changes that I think the club has made over the last few years under Matt Finnis. But firstly, Moorabbin to Seaford, and then Seaford back to Moorabbin. How did that play out?
So my recollection was that I was a staffer during the Brax government at the time. And my recollection, and I'm sure that Archie Fraser and others will ring into the show and correct me if they feel that I've done them a disservice. But my recollection was that St Kilda at the time had a proposal to move our administration wing to the South Road, where the Bowls Club was, and that we were going to move the Bowls Club back off the highway, off South Road. That's my recollection. Part of that move meant that they needed to move the pokie machines. And in so doing, Kingston Council refused to agree to support the movement of 3 of that number of pokie machines. And instead of, and by opposing it, it had to go to the Liquor Gaming Commission for approval. And the club was then concerned that because the council would oppose it, that they would not be successful with that application. That's my recollection. And as a result, Archie Fraser turned around and said, well, I'm going to take my footy ball and my goalposts and move them to Seaford if you're going to do that. And he found a council that was only too willing to support St Kilda in its move of its administration base and the football department. More importantly, the football department, obviously. That's my recollection, and I'll stand corrected if I've got any of that wrong. Obviously, it was a terrible decision, and I'll say it was a terrible decision for a number of reasons. One, the Kingston Council could have opposed it, but the club could have put in a very strong submission to say, we're moving the pokie machines a couple hundred metres. They're within the same postcode. They're within the same community. They're in the same vicinity. They're even off the same road on Linton Street. So in terms of the move, this is not a big geographic move. It's certainly not going to impact any other community than the one that they're already located in. So I think they could have mounted a very strong argument to get the support and the approval of the Liquor Licensing and Gambling Commission for the movement of those pokies. I think what it demonstrates is that there was not a great relationship between the football club and the Kingston Council. And I think that's an area that I think Matt has worked tremendously hard on, so much so that I see a very strong relationship now between Kingston Council and obviously the football club. And just to put that into perspective, I'm actually a very big supporter of the 3 tiers of government. I know people say that we've got too many politicians, but I'm no longer one. So I'm not saying it for any specific reason. Each tier of government is closer to the community than the last. So Kingston Council, far closer to the community than what the state government is. State government, again, much closer than what the federal government is. And that's by virtue of the fact of where they're located and the geographic spread that they've got responsibility for governing. Shouldn't be a surprise to people. So to have the council working so closely with the football club doesn't mean to say we're going to get everything our own way, but it means that we can have a discussion with the council. What don't they like? What do they like? Where do they want to see changes? And we can have a mature discussion with them about how we can go about doing that in order to have the right outcome for the community. And that's always got to be, if we can't get the right outcome for our community, whether it be the local community around Moorabbin, whether it be the community of our fans, supporters and paid up members, whether it be our players and our staff, then we're failing at each hurdle. And so Kingston right now really led well, both their executive team and also their councillors. And I think, again, that's something that we probably overlook in terms of the huge ticks under both Peter Summers and Matt Finnis.
Now, we said that we would talk about AFLW, and one of the things that you've been constantly pestering me about over the last few months is, why aren't you guys doing an AFLW program? Why aren't you guys covering the AFLW over the summer? And that is something that we have spoken about a lot, and it just never came to fruition this summer for a number of reasons. But you are, as you've mentioned, a self-confessed AFLW lover, as I think a lot of us are. What's been your take? I've got a couple of questions here. What's your take on the current list? Now, there's been a lot of changes from last AFLW season to where we're at now. Obviously, the senior coach of the girls team is the major one, from Peter Searle to Nick Del Santo. The performance of the girls throughout this season has been perhaps disappointing, but also perhaps not unexpected, given a number of factors. And Thirdly, as again, staying away from politics, but as a public servant, what's your take on the Georgia Patrikios situation? And is that a situation that can be resolved at a club level? Can GP play for St Kilda again?
That is only a question that Georgia Patrikios can answer. And it's going to require her to firstly and foremostly be vaccinated, right? We saw the issue with Jack Darling in West Coast and the impact that the team has had in taking him back into the fold. And that's only going to be a couple of games and a pre-season. But Georgia Patrikios has sat out the whole season. And she is, without a doubt, our best player in terms of both skill level and output. So you can't paper mache over that. And for a long part of the season, I said nothing in relation to Georgia's decision, personal decision, by all means. But in the last probably third of the season, I started to get a little bit more vocal about it because I think the club has done the right thing by her and not spoken about it. But as a fan or a paid up member that doesn't have that link into the club, I feel that I can confidently talk about the fact that she has let her teammates down. And it's not golf. It's not an individual sport. It is a team sport, and they rely on each other and the trust of each other to have their backs. And unfortunately, and we won't get into it beyond what I've just said, Georgia's made decisions that she believes are either in her or her family's best interests. And I'll leave that there. But it's been a big hole, and I think the team has done tremendously well. I raised an eyebrow when Peter Searle left, and a shout out to Peter and thank her for the work she did and the job she'd done as our first, and history will always show, our inaugural AFLW coach. But I think the change to Nick Del Santo has been beyond what I could have imagined at the time when he was appointed. I was a little bit nervous about his appointment. Again, I've said this publicly. I questioned whether it was a boys club appointment because he'd been looking after the next gen, but hadn't really done a coaching stint on his own, hadn't been responsible for a team, right? But beyond that, I think he's been a fantastic output for the club. I can see a clear game style. I've seen significant improvement in their skills and decision making over the season compared to last year. We lost 3 games by less than a kick. We probably should have lost a 4th, but thankfully the Gold Coast lass kicked the point, which let us win that game. And then, of course, we got touched up right at the end by the Crows. I think the future is actually pretty bright if we can keep our team together. And it's a big if. And this is where I'd be critical of the AFL. The AFL is introducing 4 new teams next year into the competition. I understand what they're doing. I understand why they're doing it. If I'd been them, I would have turned around to the 4 new franchise teams and said, we're going to have to put this on hold. We can either let one of you come in each year over the next 4 years, or we can bring all 4 of you in, but we're going to actually delay it by another 2 years. And the reason for that is I think diluting the talent pool at the moment is going to have a really disastrous effect on clubs like St Kilda, who have not been able to establish themselves since they entered the competition. And for example, to have some of our best players potentially taken by a new team under the current rules, which they can, I think is very dangerous about setting those teams back without setting up the new teams for long-term success. So strategically, I would question those decisions. But just to let you know how big a fan I've become of AFLW, that I'm going to get on my next jumper 29 put on it, which is obviously Tani White's number. And 29 is not going to represent the male player. It's going to represent Tani White, because I think she is a fantastic player and I love the way she goes about it. And I think she epitomises where the club's going.
Tani White is an absolute star. And we've mentioned her a couple of times. And heading into next season, she'll be, I reckon, a smoky for our best player in the league, all of that sort of stuff after another preseason. I think she's an absolute star. What were you going to say, H?
I was going to say, just be careful. You might find she gets a lower number next season. That the number 29's in. It's
had a few names.
Men it's had a lot of players who have dropped down to a lower number and made that lower number their number. So Berkey, Jones, Baker. There's been a few. So yeah, I'd be surprised to see her in a lower number next year, maybe.
Well, H, ironically, my very first number on my jumper as a kid was Berkey's number 29. And then I followed Berkey to number 3. So the die has been cast that if that's what Tani does, my number will follow her accordingly.
Well, hopefully Tani can keep 29 for the next decade and be one of our best players for the next decade. But if you want some more hot takes, at Philip Dalidakis, not at Unplugged on Twitter, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any more questions you might have. But one of the things that we've done in this short season so far is introduce a segment called That's So St Kilda. And there is obviously every week any number of things that could be thrown about and talked about in this segment. And we've had quite a few on Twitter this week that a few of you listeners have thrown at us. But I'm going to throw it to you, H, first. What's your That's So St Kilda moment of this week?
That's just something we've already talked about enough already, I think. Just simply that we can go on I think the last week of signing players, we signed a 25-year-old and he comes out in his first game and shows the rest of them how to do it. It just so St Kilda to have a rookie show up the rest of the team. We haven't really had it happen too much before, but it's something that probably shouldn't happen. But just how we've gone the last few years, it was I guess it's something that was always bound to happen. But hopefully, yeah, the rookie can now pick up a few and bring him along with him. So it's a bit of a story that we go, all right, let's hope that doesn't happen again. But at the same time, I did say to someone that the only reason we got to see this is because our old ruckman didn't play. So the player that we're going, we're going to miss so much because he provides so much and that, and then you sort of look back and go, do you think he would have provided that much? So it was a bit of a, I guess it's almost a sliding doors when you look at it going, we may not have seen that on the weekend and we may never have seen it. So yeah, it's just the whole fact that having a rookie go in the first game and leading the way. But yeah, let's hope it's a once off and the rest of the team pick up.
For what it's worth, and there are a lot of question marks about what happens to Jack Hayes once Paddy Ryder comes back. And I think there's a spot in the team as a third forward that can lead up and play around the ground a little bit more in the role that Nick Riewoldt kind of did at the end of his career, play up to come up to the wing, be an outlet at halfback, and push the ball forward and still kick some goals at the same time. I think that Paddy, Rowan and Jack Hayes can all play in the same team with Tim Membry and Max King. But Phil Dalidakis, what is so St Kilda this week?
We lose a game that everyone wrote a win in our column against, being Collingwood, and it will be so St Kilda to travel across the country to Perth to play the Fremantle Dockers in a game that we are not expected to win, that most people have tipped us to lose, and for us to come out and smash them. That will be so St Kilda.
Yeah.
And then to not turn up against Richmond the week after.
Stop it.
Well, we have had one, Michael on Twitter, Michael_60, who a lot of you listeners will know from the Moorabbin wing, from Sensational, etc. His That So St Kilda was Dusty will miss this week and come back against us and have 38 and kick 3 next week. That's probably an understatement. He'll probably have 45 and kick 4. But so much of this sounds the same as to what you guys have said. We've had And this was my one as well. Roars at Roars on Twitter said Friday night's result was so St Kilda, marquee Friday night slot, massive league rival, tribute to Warney, $1.60 favourites turned into a dog shit performance. That's so St Kilda. And that was mine. And Roars, you're spot on. We've had a couple of others. The Animal Enclosure at Stu Blogs on Twitter. It hasn't arrived yet, but it will be the news reports on the coaches delivering quote unquote home truths, and then the same coaches not following through at the selection table. That's so St Kilda. Matt Swanee, who's a massive fan of the podcast, and thanks, Matt, for all your support. A father-son slaughtering us on debut. We don't get any father-sons, let alone a natural number one pick type. And then Michael again, who mentioned while his dad helped them to a 178-point win against us 43 years ago. Tim Dole at Mad Saint, not getting the obvious one in front of goal. That would have had us up by 5 points, 5 points down with 3 minutes to play. Next play, having a holding the ball called against Mason Wood, where he got a handball off. That's so St Kilda. And there was a lot of these throughout the week. Tonight on Twitter, whenever we talk about that's so St Kilda, we get a lot of these. So keep sending them in. Phil, looked like we're on video here. It looked like you were about to say something. Have you got something to add to any of those?
Well, obviously that I've given you the that's so St Kilda, but there is a rumor going around that Dusty is potentially going to retire. And I heard that earlier before we came on to the show. Who knows what's true and what isn't, but that would be so St Kilda for him to either retire and have one last game, or for him to retire after this round and for them to come out and want to do it for him one last time. So backing on that, yes, that is a living fear, H, in me always.
Well, so the rumours are going between him retiring and him playing Sunday. It's
well, I don't think he's playing
knows.
Sunday. I don't think he's playing Sunday. I think that's a very fair assumption at this point.
He's definitely withdrawn
Sunday.
He's definitely withdrawn from the game.
Yeah, whether or not he'll be back for us in a week or so is another question. Looking forward to this week, I should say, Sunday, early evening Melbourne time, Fremantle at Optus Oval. Dougal Howard, obviously, we found out today, is out in the AFL health and safety protocols. Dara Joyce has been named as his replacement at fullback. Dean Kent and Mitch Owens have been omitted. Nazaya Wanganeen Malera has been named for his official. Is this his official or unofficial debut? I'm not sure. And Jared Lynett out of the SANFL is in for his first game. The emergencies: Cooper Sharman, Tom Highmore, Tom Campbell, and Ben Long. Guys, what are you thinking about this week? Phil, you mentioned at the top of the show you wanted to talk about selection for this week. What have you got for us?
So I want to go right outside the box. And I really like Dara Joyce. I like the fact that he's what we would used to call an honest, a GOP, a good, honest player, right? And I think, though, that we've probably passed by that experiment. As harsh as that might be, I don't want to close the book on him forever, but I think that game 2, for him to just come in to fill a peg, if he's good enough to come in and fill the fullback's position, he should be playing in that team anyway, right? You can't come in and fill the fullback position if you're not the third best defender in the back line. So I've got a question mark. I would rather see, now bear in mind that Joyce is 194 centimetres, Leinart is 195 that's come into the team anyway. I would rather see us put Leinart into that position, or have Membry, who's only 188 but plays taller than that with his leap. And he's shown when he comes in the last couple of minutes of every quarter where he comes in, peels off, intercepts the ball. If he played on a key position player and that position player then had to be accountable to what he was doing, I'd like to see that. And I would like to see Cooper Sharman play in the forward line. And the reason for that is the guy is quick. He is lightning quick. And he showed at the end of last season that he does lots of good work on the ground. And he's just as adept at actually roving his own ball, like a much shorter bloke. And he's 193 centimetres. And you might remember from last season, he was a one grab mark. Lightning on the lead, good at ground level. And so he can apply that pressure if the ball comes to ground, not just leave it to the little men. So I'd rather see somebody like that come into the team, leave Darragh Joyce out, unless you're going to play Darragh. If you're prepared to play him week in, week out as taking the third big tall, leave him in there. But I don't think you're doing anything for him or the team structure to bring him in and then Dougal's back next week and he goes out.
Now, I've got something on this, and I'm going to throw to you in a sec, but I have something on Joyce, and I said this a number of times last year that Darragh Joyce, when he got his shot last year, did absolutely nothing wrong and didn't deserve to get dropped to bring Chip Frawley back in. And one of the reasons, we all know that Geelong game, Max kicked, what was it, 1 goal, 6? 1 goal, 6. And we led for most of the game until Geelong ran over the top of us, and Hawkins kicked a couple in the last quarter, I believe, and they ran over the top of us, and ultimately we lost that game. I'm not sure we lose that game if Darragh Joyce plays that game. Obviously, there are other factors, and if Max kicks 5 goals 2 or 3 goals 3 or whatever it is, we probably win the game too. But Darragh Joyce, in the 2 or 3 games that he played while James Frawley was out, I don't think he deserved to get dropped for James Frawley. James Frawley, in my opinion, had always been brought in to be a backup to backup and wasn't meant to play unless he really, really had to. And I think Darragh Joyce had to play last year and had to play more games. I think he deserved to play more games. And I'm not against him coming in to be the backup for Dougal Howard, but I do agree with you, Phil, that he deserves, if he plays well this week, that he deserves another shot the following week, regardless of whether Dougal Howard is ready to come back in or not. H, where do you sit on Darragh Joyce, and how do you feel?
Pretty much just about to make the same. Yeah, I was pretty much just about to make the same argument that what he showed those last 2 games last year that he played as well as any defender we had. We actually, I think he possibly even got some votes. We gave him votes in one of those games.
I think you might be right.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was a Sydney or Geelong game. He looked fantastic in the back line. He got to the contest. He used the ball well. He just kept his player to minimal output, and we're sort of going, hang on, as it all of a sudden just flicked that this is how you play because of the first few games before that, you sort of go, okay, he hasn't improved any more than what we'd seen previously. But all of a sudden, it just switched it on. You go, hang on, we've actually got a reasonable looking player here. And those 2 games may have actually kept him on the list. When you look back now, if he hadn't played him, he probably wouldn't be with us anymore. I'm assuming he'd probably be back in Ireland by now. So it's just he hasn't had a great run ever. And that's what a player sort of needs. They need to get, I guess, a number of games in a row. I think 2 games is the 3 maybe. He's maybe the most he's ever played in a row. But experience, that's what it takes. He's got the opportunity to again show us what he can do, and if he does what he did late last year, then he's got to be given the opportunity not to just be, oh, you were a replacement, but given the opportunity to say, make the other players push you out. Don't go in thinking that once they're back, you're out. Play for the position. Make it yours. So it's, again, another player that we go, okay, we know they have the ability. So make them fight for these spots. That is the best thing for a team, is when multiple players are fighting for the same spot, and it happens in multiple positions around the ground. That's where we can try and get the best out of every single player out there on the field at the time, knowing that their job is not safe. So, hey, he's got a great opportunity here to step in and, again, try to cement himself, get in early in the season to try and, hold a spot for, at least a few rounds. See how we go.
So, now, H, can I just ask, H, So who is taking Dougal's spot? Is it Leinart at 195 centimetres, or is it Darragh Joyce at 194 centimetres?
I think Joyce does.
Yeah.
Leinart's hasn't really played that key defender, I don't think.
Yeah.
Whereas that's basically the position that Joyce has played in the VFL. He's been a key defender. So I think when I saw Leinart, I was a bit like, he's a bit taller, but he's still that sort of, I guess, sweeping back. It's sort of, you sort of look at him, and I'd almost compare him to what Callum does. It's similar, I guess, similar sort of build. And I only saw minimal of him at Port Adelaide, but from the few things I've seen, it looked very sort of similar kind of player.
I'm a big fan of Jared Leinart, and I think that his point of difference in our team is his disposal efficiency, and he is deceptively tall, so he's bigger than he plays, and I think this is one of the questions. So clearly, we need better foot skills coming out of the back half. We've got Cal Wilkie, who's ultra reliable. We know that. We know that there's Brad Hill at times off halfback. We know there's Jimmy Webster. We know there's Ben Patton. Dan McKenzie at times off halfback as well. The question mark is, and I agree, H. I think Darragh Joyce is the full back role, while Leinart is more that Nick Caulfield, Josh Battle, third, fourth man up, sweeper type role, distributor from halfback, etc. And we've seen, even in the short time that he's been at the club, the cannon that he has in a boot, and that he can deliver the ball incredibly well. The question mark that I have, and Phil, you mentioned Cooper Sharman up forward. Obviously, Dean Kent is out this week. Why is Cooper Sharman not in that forward line? And is it a balance thing with Jack Hayes, with Membry, with King, etc.? Is it too tall for Cooper Sharman? And why is Jared Leinart, as someone who's been at the club for 3 seconds, in the team this week ahead of Tom Highmore?
So, well, there's a big height difference between Tom Highmore and Jared Leinart, right?
Well, it's not big. It's there. It's a couple of centimeters, but Tom Highmore again plays smaller than he is. Tom Highmore, there were games when he had 10 plus intercept marks playing across halfback as a small defender.
Well, you're quite right.
He's 100, what,
93.
192?
He's 193. You're quite right. He's in fact the same height as Sharman. 2 centimeters shorter than Leinart. You're quite right. I always thought he was slightly smaller than that, but I think it's probably for Tom. He's had an interrupted preseason, as Cooper Sharman has. So, but I think that what Cooper brings is very different to what Jack Hayes brings in the forward line, right? So
agreed.
So I think that I know that there's a view at the club that the club forward line would be too tall with Sharman, with Membry, with Jack Hayes, with Max King up there. But if you had Membry playing as a really high half forward, sort of even up around sort of the wing type position as the link player, then I think Sharman can fulfill a couple of roles. Anyway, can I throw another name really wacky right out there for you? Again, it's not that I'm trying to stop Darragh Joyce from getting his game, but again, I think the two of you have articulated really well what I was thinking, which is if you're going to bring the kid in, bring him in for a number of weeks and let him actually establish himself rather than in, out. And that's all I was wanting to say, not have a crack at him, because I think he's done everything that's required and we've required of him. But let me throw you something out there. What about if you wanted to bring Sharman in, you threw someone like Mason Wood up at centre half back, right? So you've got Josh Battle to play full back, and you've got Mason Wood is deceptively quick. He's got a big tank on him. So being able to spoil the ball, he's been around, so it's not like he's just come into the system. He knows all about body positioning as a former forward. He also understands what defenders have done to him. So why wouldn't we potentially say, okay, we've got Leinart there at 195, potentially Tom Highmore there at 193, Mason Wood at 192, and just go, Sharman, you go into the forward line. Mason Wood, instead of you playing half forward flank or on the wing, we're going to take you into the back line and just try something out, because I think that adds a different element and different flexibility, which I'd love to see.
He could play that, because where I really like him is on the wing. We really need to use him a bit more, taking that mark on the wing and not needing King coming down so far down the ground just to get the ball. He needs to be that player there to then get it to King. But he could also play that role that if the other team has got the ball, get back there. He could play that sweeping back and then move up to the wing as we attack. So if he's not on the side of the ground, that I guess when the ball comes in playing defense, then he could cover that. But it's possible, I guess, if a matchup, I'm thinking possibly a matchup sort of thing. If it looks at sort of and go, okay, look, this player will work with this player, this player will work with this player. If there's a tall, fast forward, like say, if Bont or someone like that goes into a forward line at some point, you need someone who's reasonably quick, reasonably strong. It got a defensive mind, but is also pretty good attacking to get away from him. He could play that sort of role when, like, as I say, as a Bont might go down to the forward line at some point. But he's the sort of player that he should be picking up, not waiting for a defender to pick him up down there. Get the defender, like give one of them a rest or something at some point. So he could play that swinging role that I'm kind of glad that Battle isn't playing as much anymore, because I think that's more what Wood is suited to compared to what Battle was. So there is an opportunity, but I don't think it's a full-time position for him. If something's not working, give it a go. Why not? The worst thing that can happen is it still doesn't work. I mean, yeah, if it's not working at that moment, just, yeah. I'd like to see Ratton try a few things out when, like the other night, we're 7 goals down. I mean, I don't know if he tried something different, but something changed and all of a sudden we were a different team. So it's that whole thing of it. Yeah, if something's not working, give something a go. And that could be something to try.
I've got absolutely nothing against giving something a go, especially when things aren't working, and whether that's moving Jack Hayes onto a wing or centre half forward or whatever it is, or at some point moving Mason Wood to centre half back, whatever that looks like. I've got no issue with trying things out and switching things up to impact whatever's happening on field. But I'm going to be really contrarian here and say I want Mason Wood closer to goal than away from it. I don't like Mason Wood on the wing. I think that he's one of the rare players, and so often we see players that get the yips in front of goal, but their field kicking is so good. And we've had a number of those types of players that have incredibly poor conversion rates in front of goal, but you look at them kicking to players or kicking to positions on the field, and they are so good. And Mason Wood is almost the exact opposite of that. Mason Wood, when he gets the ball in the wing, I shudder. And I feel like Mason Wood in front of goal is a very, very good player. And I think that he's underrated. I think he can make a real impact for us. I really rate Mason Wood as a forward player. I think he reads the ball in flight really well, and that he plays a little bit. I think at times he plays bigger than he is, but I think ability-wise and agility-wise, he plays generally smaller than he is. And I like him closer to goal rather than up on the wing or down back. I would much rather see someone like Tim Membry, who we've seen over the last 12 months spend the last 2 or 3 minutes of each quarter kind of push down a half back and be that spare man in defense. I would rather see Tim Membry do more of that more often during the game, and have someone like Cooper Sharman being that dynamic impact player, able to impact a contest, from three men deep, being able to jump over the top of them, and Tim Membry go back for a while, then push Mason Wood back.
Just to break in quickly, Buddy's just kicked his 1,000th goal. The CG has been swamped. It's just saw Clarko in the Swans Swan scarf. That's interesting.
That is a pretty amazing moment. I'm not sure that we'll see.
I think that's something we're probably not going to see again.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure we'll see this again in AFL football.
No,
I think a lot of us were lucky. Phil, you're a lot older than we are, but we were lucky to see Dunstall, Lockett, Ablett, etc. I'm not sure that this new generation of footy fans is going to see a moment like this again.
So I told you I was always stood up the Snow Deli end. So when Plugger kicked his 100 at Linton Street in 97, I think it was, I duly ran onto the ground
87?
and got it. 87, sorry. I think I said 97, didn't I? 87.
I told you were a lot older than us.
I duly ran onto the ground and I made it as far as Spud. And that was the very first time I met Spud. And I worked out that I wasn't going to be able to get to Plugger. So I just stood there for a couple of minutes and talked to Danny Frawley. And I tell you what, that was just a memory that will never, ever leave me. And
what did you talk about?
Oh, mate, gee, I'm very old. Dementia's starting to creep in. So I couldn't tell you what we talked about, but I just remember looking up to him and thinking, God, this guy's huge. He's so big. And I was just a little tacker at the time, but it was a real highlight that's lived with me. And I got to speak to him a couple of weeks before he died. And he obviously had his demons that I wasn't aware of, that other people would have been, but he was a great man. But more importantly, he was a loving husband and a loving dad. And I think it's so fitting that we've got the Danny Frawley Wellness Centre there. And I've completely taken the conversation in a different tack. I apologise, but I'm just getting it back to where we were. I'm agreeing with H 110%. I'm not agreeing with you, not even 1%. Mason Wood on the wing can be devastating because he can still run forward and kick goals, but he can use that tank and his speed and his marking prowess to benefit that a la Matthew Richardson type position. I think that I think
I was going to say a late Rewalt, wasn't it?
I think H, you're spot on the money, and we should take the microphone away from this young fella who pretends that he knows something about football.
Oh, you are killing me. Look, Mason, I really, more than most Kangaroos fans, and most Kangaroos fans really like Mason Wood. I really, really rate Mason Wood, but I rate him extremely highly as a forward, more so than anything else. And I just think it's his field kicking that lets him down. I don't mind him as a forward that pushes up to the wing to become an outlet out of the middle, but I want him 75% inside forward 50, where he can use his skill that we don't have a lot of, which is converting. He's a wonderful kick for goal. He's a beautiful kick for goal. That I want him utilizing that where we need him the most, because we have a number of other guys that can play those other roles, like a Josh Battle or a Highmore or a Joyce or a Howard or whatever at fullback, centre halfback. But the question mark this week, we had Mitch Owen's debut last week. We had Nasiah Wanganeen-Malera somewhat debut last week. And one of the questions that's been put to me at different points of this week and last is the recruitment of Wanganeen-Malera and what that means looking back at the Brad Hill trade. I don't think that they have anything to do with each other. What's been put to me is that the recruitment of Wanganeen-Malera at the draft pick that we selected him at means that the Brad Hill trade hasn't worked and that we need to go in a different direction at some point. This is going to take a couple of years to hand over, etc. But selecting Nasiah Wanganeen-Malera with that type of high draft pick means that the Hill trade hasn't worked. We haven't gotten the value out of him that we expected, etc. Now, that's a separate argument, but I'm not sure that one has to do with the other. H, any thoughts on Nasiah Wanganeen-Malera this week?
I'm wondering if that was a set change. They gave Mitch a game last week and then Nasiah this week. I kind of looked at it that way because I actually thought he would have got in ahead of Mitch, to be honest.
I thought so too, to be honest.
Whether that was premeditated, that was how it was going to work, unless obviously Mitch absolutely dominated, but obviously he didn't. So the plan went ahead. Because I just had a feeling that why they would name him as the sub if he wasn't going to play. and give him a proper debut. So I did find it a strange reason to have him as the sub, because I still don't believe that should be a match. I don't think you should get a game accredited unless you run on the field.
Yep.
And yeah, this week should be his real debut. So it's a case of, I think that's pretty much what they had in plan, and it'd be great to see him come out and kick a couple this week. Got some great raps on him, as I saying. His disposal, he was meant to be the best kid with the best disposal. So, is he more the sort of player that, we talked about before about Mitch being in the middle towards the end? Then is he the sort of player that may someday be in there too? And unlike, I guess, a lot of center players just boot the ball, hitting that target up at the top of the 50 or just inside the square and setting us up going into the forward line. Is he going to have that silky skill to give us that moving the ball forward nice and clean? And it's something we've really been looking forward for a long time now.
So let me say something controversial. His disposal can't be any worse than Dunstan's, who had number 7 before him. And if it's half as good as what Cuz's was when Cuz wore number 7, we have a jet.
Absolutely. Yep. I thought it was wonderful to see Cuz give that jumper over to Wanganeen Malera last week. Excuse me, ahead of that round 1 non-debut. This celebration at the SCG is going on for about as long as this episode. What do we need to see from Wanganeen Malera for him to keep his spot? We've seen Mitch Owens get his debut and get dropped straight away for what was, again, admittedly an average game. It wasn't great, but it also wasn't horrible. Like, we've seen worse games. And there were other players, more senior players, that didn't contribute as much or impact the game as much, potentially. What does Wanganeen Malera have to do this week against Fremantle? And we've seen some, we've got some big outs, obviously. Freo have some bigger outs. Nat Fyfe is out. David Mundy's out. And David Mundy tears us a new one every time we play them. I think he averages 36 against us or something incredibly insane against us, something like that. So there are some big names out. Sean Darcy is back for them. James Aish is back for them. Joel Hamling is back at fullback. But for us, what does Wanganeen Malera have to do to keep his spot?
His job. He'll be given a job.
Which is what?
Well, we don't know. That's the thing. We won't know what his job is. But if he does it, that's how he keeps his spot. So if basically he gets told to, I'm trying to think who he might be matched up against.
Let's put it this way, H. Don't sit on the fence. But do you want Wanganeen Malera at halfback and you push Brad Hill onto a wing opposite Jack Sinclair, or do you want Wanganeen Malera on a wing opposite Sinclair and Hill stay at halfback?
Does he start as a forward pocket or something? No, that's the other question. Just to get him into the game to start. Just start him up there. Hopefully get the ball down there a bit. Don't throw him under the bus to begin with. Get him into the game. See his confidence, and then maybe switch him back. Because as we know, he's been basically touted as a backman wingman, but I think we've got enough of those players at the minute to play with, and get him into the game first, I think. If we find that he's not finding the ball, then maybe send him back to someone on the back line to see it a bit more, like to basically learn off one of their forward pockets or something, just to learn how to pick the game up. But it's just a matter of getting him in there first. If we're finding we're attacking and getting a lot of the ball into our forward line, get him in there, get him having a look at it and try to get as much as he can while he can. It's not saying it's good. We don't expect the world of him, obviously. It's not like he's not Hayes. He's not a 25-year-old. He's a kid, and confidence is the world. That's what we need from him. If he gets in there and he's got the confidence, we'll know early enough. If he gets a few early touches and he hits the targets, we know he's switched on and he's ready to go. But if he goes near the ball, falls back a bit, drops off, sort of hangs around the pack, doesn't really find too much of it, then I think you got to put him into a position, say, okay, get in there and get something. Go for it.
Phil?
So I don't think he's going to naturally have the tank to play the wing, being in his first year of AFL. So unless they're planning on sort of playing him 5 minutes in each quarter on the wing and then moving him, I'm not sure that that's probably the best place to start him. Half forward, I see the merits of that age, but I think it depends on his forward pressure. If he can bring that forward pressure, which we lacked last week, almost a bit like the way that Ben Long runs around as a bit as a kamikaze in the forward line with his pressure. And I don't say that because Ben's also Indigenous. I say that because of genuinely the way he plays. Then that could be a possibility. The other thing that I think is if we follow a little bit about what Collingwood did with Nick Dacos, different style of players, don't get me wrong, but they kind of moved Nick onto a halfback flank and allowed him to be quite creative with his ball use. And if Nazia's ball use is close to what Nick Dacos's was in terms of his accuracy and efficiency, like if I have a look at the team, his best matchup would be Lockie Schultz. I mean, Lockie's 24, so he's got a few years on him in terms of body development, but Lockie's only 178, and he's and I think that would probably on a halfback flank allow him to have that tackling pressure, almost being led to the ball by where the forward's moving, but then give him the ability to run off and create. But ultimately, again, I don't want to sound like this is an anti-Nick Splitter commentary, but I'm just agreeing with H a lot here. And ultimately, what keeps him in the team is if he ticks the box on everything that the coach has asked him to do. And if he does that, he stays in the game. And the players that I think should have some concerns after last week are the senior players. Obviously, Kent's gone. He was on my list. Higgins, Burns, Webster, and DMAC. And I love everything that DMAC brings to the game, but his disposal efficiency lets himself down. And I love his attack on the football. I love what he brings. I think there is a spot in our first 18 for Mackenzie. I'm a massive rap for him, but unless he wants to go the way of Dunstan with his disposal efficiency, he has to pick that up. He has to get better at that. Jimmy Webster, I think, is fantastic. I was so excited to see him back in the team last year because I thought he was hardly done by the year before, and I think he deserves every opportunity. But again, he let himself down with his normally very good disposal. He let himself down last week, and that's where we're missing. That's where we're really missing with our injuries, right? Because if we didn't have those injuries to Hunter Clark, to Nick Caulfield, even to our former skipper, Jaron Geary, then that puts pressure on these boys to perform or suitably understand why they're dropped into the Magoos. And until we can get that kind of pressure coming up, there will always be something in the back of the players' minds that tells them that if they try hard, even if they get some things wrong, they're probably just going to be okay because that pressure. And that's why, and we haven't talked about being in the final year of Brett Radden's contract. But if the club genuinely believes that we should be blooding young players and giving some game time to them, then they need to come out and give Brett Radden a 1 year extension straight away. It doesn't have to be a 2 year, just give him a 1 year and take that pressure off, which then allows Brett Radden to bring the young kids in and say, okay, we are trying to get to the A, but right now we need to give kids game time and get them into the system because we recognise that we've got some players in our club that cannot and will not take us forward. And I note that, Nick, you put out onto social media what questions they should ask us tonight. And one of the questions was to us, honest opinion on our list and ability to win a flag with it. And what do we need to make it flag worthy? And we need a centre half back, and we need an A grade mid, right? We need an A grade mid, the way that we should have had Petrarca, but then got McCartan and now have neither, or Bontempelli instead of getting obviously Jack. And that's no slight on Jack, by the way, but that's the type of mid that we're missing, a centre half back. And I would have thought that just those two positions alone, and probably if you wanted to be really greedy, a genuine centre half forward, a big bodied centre half forward.
Now, I agree. And I think some of this, you mentioned Ratton's contract, and you're right, that's not something that we've touched on at all so far in the couple of episodes that we've done, nor tonight. But I agree in that you cannot expect a coach fighting for his football life and his career and his livelihood to stop playing big-bodied, experienced players instead of potentially more talented youngsters who may not be quite ready for the big time. You just can't expect that. And if you are expecting that of Brett Ratton this year, then either the reality is that the club needs to offer him that extension now, or change your expectations, because it's not going to happen. And no coach, no senior coach in their right mind, outside of someone at a complete rebuild like Gold Coast almost the entire time, or North Melbourne a couple of years ago, or Brisbane a couple of years before that, would do that. And that's not Brett Ratton's fault. Well, it kind of is his fault. But no coach, no senior coach in their right mind would do that while they're fighting for another job, another contract or an extension, because it doesn't make sense. And so in that regard, you can understand why he does some of the selection things. And at the same time, you've got to understand that Brett Ratton is not the only selector in the selection panel or at the selection table. But one of the things that you mentioned around playing the kids is that, and we touched on it earlier without going into too much more detail on this, but those statement selections that we saw under Ross Lyon, we haven't seen since then. And, now, week in, week out, you'll see someone like a Dean Kent get dropped, or, a Dan McKenzie or a Jimmy Webster or whatever, but you don't see the Seb Ross or the senior players, whatever, have that statement omission, have that dropping back to the twos and do the work, make the effort, get back into the team. It's always the Kent, the Webster, the McKenzie, the Highmore, the Joyce, etc. And it's never those bigger name players that occasionally need the kick up the arse. And that's what I was disappointed about this week, that it was Mitch Owens that seems to have been made the scapegoat, and not some of those senior players, big bodies that you expect more from week in, week out. And so the question I have to you both now is anything less than a win acceptable as to where we're at now, or are you expecting other things? Are there other outcomes that can still be seen as a successful outing this week against this Fremantle in Perth on Sunday? H?
It is Freo. It is in Perth. I mean, technically, you generally go to Perth as a bit of an underdog anyway, no matter what the situation sort of is. It is. I mean, I don't know if it's as bigger thing now being at the new stadium as it was at like Subiaco, or even going back to the Wacker. The home crowd just seemed to have that little bit of, I guess, influence in the game. I mean, I know it's usually a rain of booze, but it's just you've got the travel over. You've got all that sort of thing to deal with. You're in a different time zone that you only go into once a year, maybe. But then you look at on paper at the moment, and as you're saying, no Fife, no Mundy. That's their engine room. That's the two that have led this team for 8 years now. That's the reason they have been good. You got to take the advantage there. You've got to make the most of when a team is missing two of their best players like that. We have to control the midfield. They've got younger players. They've got Brayshaw. They got the young kid, Rising Star, Caleb Saram. That they're the sort of players that, as I was saying with some other players, they given the opportunity. They're the players who are now going to go, this is my opportunity to show that I'm going to be a club leader. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to basically fill the gap that these two have left. So you need to get on top of them early. You need to control the midfield. You need to get in and take them out of the game. Don't let them have the influence, and get that confidence up that thinking, we're going to play a good game here. Get under them early and just keep them out and try to control that midfield. And that's where it's all going to start. But if they manage to get on top of us, we're going to struggle to win that back, because I can't remember the temperature is going to be. I think it's going to be a warmish sort of day over there.
It's a warm day.
It still is this time of year, so it's a matter of, if we're behind late on, we might struggle to get back into it, because we're probably going to be running out of legs towards the end of the game. It's condition. I mean, it's still warmish here at the moment. It wasn't cold Friday night, but it's certainly not the same heat that you will find over there that will sort of drain you a bit more than what it does over here. So get them early, make the most of what they're missing, exploit it. And as I said, on paper, again, it's a game we should win, but there's so many things that point to they could knock us off. But it's a danger game still.
Phil, final thoughts on Fremantle on Sunday?
So you have to have caveats for any injuries that happen during the game. But that caveat aside, we should all have an expectation that we go over to Fremantle and win against a team missing their 2 star players, right? It's that simple. And we got smashed out of the middle last week against Collingwood, and the clearances, they beat us by some ridiculous number when we pride ourselves on clearance work. And nothing less than a win, bar obviously anything that happens during the game that affects the outcome, is something that we should have an expectation on. I think for far too long, the club and supporters have had, or supporters in particular, have let the club off from delivering anything less than 100% effort, 100% of the time. In my job, day in, day out, if I don't perform, I'm out of a job. I don't get to pick and choose which days I go to work and decide when I'm going to do my work. I don't get to pick and choose when I put effort in. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with us holding our players to that expectation. And so from my perspective, absolutely, we should go expecting a win, right? And I think that anything less would be, for me, a massive disappointment, as I said, save for injuries on the day that affect team structure or affect personnel in order to implement that game plan. Right? The times for excuses is well and truly over.
Agreed. And speaking of time over, we have gone incredibly over time, but there are a couple of other things just briefly wanted to mention. Great news that Paddy Ryder is returning to VFL competition this weekend. I think it's VFL reserves, or is VFL round 1 starts this week. So Paddy Ryder will be playing football again incredibly soon. The other one, not so good news. Oscar Adams, as we know, had a driving incident in February and has been sanctioned by the club. Turns out that he was over the alcohol limit in terms of that drink driving offence, and has been sanctioned by the club. It means that he has to front up in front of his playing group, his peers, and apologise. It also means that he's ineligible for selection until at least round 3 of the VFL season. So that's another 3 weeks from now. I think we can probably all agree that if you drink and drive, you are a bloody idiot. Oscar, get better. You have to do better. You are a role model, and there is no excuse for drinking and driving. Any final thoughts on the footy or anything that we've discussed this week, fellas?
Just be good to get into it. We're going to wait all the way to Sunday afternoon. It's be nice to go into work Monday and say, yep, okay, we're back to 1-on-1, but drop this, and Monday morning is going to be a bit of a drag, I reckon. So, yep, let's get into it. Hope that they turn up, get us back on level pegging.
It would be wonderful to walk into the office as someone who works in sport and in an office full of footy fans, to be able to walk into an office after a Saints win. It's been a while. Phil, thank you for joining us, mate. It's been a great pleasure to chat with you. Thanks for giving us some of your time, some of your stories and experience around the Traps. That's been wonderful, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, lads. And I just leave with you that I think Jack Bytel has a massive future if he can get his body right. And also just leave you with this question. When does the club expect loyalty, and when does it give loyalty to our players? And I'll leave you with that thought in relation to Jack Bytel. Seb Ross has been a fantastic servant of our club, and I think that we owe him a debt of gratitude and loyalty to him. But his position, if Jack Bytel is fit and firing, that's the position that Jack Bytel needs, and that's the position that the club needs for us to continue to advance in years to come. So I don't have an answer for that, but it's an interesting question in terms of loyalty.
I think we can all agree that seeing Jack Bytel become an AFL star at another club would just be so St Kilda.